Welcome into episode 20 of This Week in College Hockey. We got a full show today, and it's championship weekend. All 6 conferences will be decided, or their tournaments will be decided this weekend, and the NCAA selection show will be this Sunday. We'll be taking a look at that. Dan Schulman here. Joining me today, Jake Reiser as always. Jake, how's it going for you today?
Doing good. It feels weird that we're already at championship weekend. It's been one long hockey season. We're really down to the end at this point.
It truly has. Also with us, Jordan Tebow today. Jordan just back from Jamaica.
Yeah, it was a good trip, and I'm ready for this weekend. It's going to be mayhem.
Yeah,
all over the place.
Jamaican it crazy here.
Yeah,
exactly. and finally, joining us via the phone from Vail, Colorado. He didn't get the memo that spring break only lasted 1 week. Chris Pichet. Chris, how's it going out there in the mountains?
Doing well. I only missed one class this week due to the snow day, so I think I'm in the winter's school here, and you guys are losing out in the cold Boston.
Don't you go somewhere warm for spring break, bud? No, didn't you go somewhere warm?
It was 60 degrees skiing today, so I'm not complaining.
Damn.
Oh, man.
Ooh.
I mean, not exactly skiing weather, but certainly favorable conditions.
Mm-hmm.
We'll hop right into it here on the podcast with our weekly honors. We have 2 weeks to cover here as we were off for spring break. So our teams of the last 2 weeks, the first Niagara, which I never actually thought I'd be highlighting Niagara on this podcast this season after a 3-win campaign. But then they upset the reigning Atlantic Hockey champions, RIT, in a 3-game set. They won 2 games in the playoffs, 3 games all year, so a grand total of 5 for the Purple Eagles, a big showing from them the weekend before. And then Bowling Green, the team of this past week, knocking off the WCHA regular season champs Bemidji State.
I'm really impressed by Bowling Green because we know that Michael Bitzer at Bemidji State was a goaltender we all had our eyes on, and he's in the top 10 for the Hobie Baker. We'll be talking more about those candidates later on. But that's tough for Bemidji State, and a great job by Bowling Green to be able to knock off the regular season champs.
Yeah, and Bitzer, I mean, himself, he didn't really have the greatest showing. I mean, he faced 16 shots in the third period. And that was one of his in game 2, and that was one of his stronger periods of the whole tournament, but he couldn't stop the game-winning goal, and that was Matt Polkamp, scored on a bit of a rebound goal. But, yeah, so they won They won game 1 and game 2, so impressive.
And our defensive player of the week, 2 shutouts to eliminate Alabama Huntsville. Wow, that's old. I didn't even update the defensive player of the week. Our defensive player of the week, it was going to be Bowling Green's goalie again, Chris Nell, for his performance against Bemidji State. He eliminated Alabama Huntsville a couple weeks ago, but didn't even update that. But guys, Chris Nell, he's heating up at the right time.
He's been the rock for Bowling Green all year. 33 games played. He's 17, 13, and 2, 916 save percentage, so that's pretty decent. They'd played Bemidji at the very beginning of the year, and they lost. He gave up 6 goals in that weekend, didn't make a ton of saves. And then they played home against Bemidji, and they also took a loss, gave up 2 goals in that one. So that's great for Chris now to be able to recover the way he has and be able to eliminate Bemidji at Bemidji, too.
Yeah, and against, his counterpart in goal, Michael Bitzer, who, as we said, didn't have the greatest weekend, but Chris Nell really upstaging him in that series. And, right now he's 15th in the NCAA in goals against. He's at 2.14. He's got 4 shutouts. And he's also 22nd in save percentage, so he's right around the middle mark there. But what jumps out for me is that Bowling Green's defense is 16th in the country, so and he's a big part of that.
And for Chris, I know you've talked about how important having a good goalie is before on this podcast, pretty much all season long. So how important is it for a team like Bowling Green, who maybe might not have had the best regular season, but how important is it for them to heat up at this time? And a goalie to be playing his best?
Well, I think in any conference, especially when you can get a goalie that's playing red hot, not only can it get you a chance to go deep in the conference tournament, but in Bowling Green's case, it could get them a chance at the NCAA tournament. And it seems like every single year, normally in a major conference, we see a goalie really stand on his head for a weekend or just a latter stretch of March. That really is the defining moment. I know we don't want to talk about it on this podcast, but Providence had a pretty solid netminder a few years ago. And I think this weekend in the Hockey East, which we'll get to in a little bit, we got 4 really solid goalies, and all of them can stand on their heads and steal games. And I think at the end of the season, it really doesn't matter how good your team is. It helps, but you really need a solid goaltender. That really can change things, make a decent team a great team in March.
Our offensive players of the week, Troy Joseph from last week with a 4-goal and 2-assist weekend in a sweep of RPI. He played for Clarkson. Clarkson Golden Knights, though, eliminated this past week. And then our most recent offensive player of the week, Austin Cangelosi from BC, 3 goals and 1 assist in a 14-goal outburst for the Eagles as they seem to have woke up all of a sudden. 7-0, 7-4 winners over Vermont, and they have earned a spot in the semifinals of Hockey East.
The Florida native and Cangelosi doing well. You feel bad for BC because they don't have the superstars they normally have, so you're looking for guys all around that team to be able to contribute, and I guess last week it was Cangelosi's turn. He also had a good showing with a goal against BU in the Beanpot semifinals. He looked good. He's got a great right shot. He's elusive in the corners, so good for Cangelosi for stepping up for BC.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this guy's face-off numbers. He's just next to none. Has been all season and throughout his career. But I mean, like you said, 3 goals in a 14-goal weekend for BC against a guy like Stefanos Lekis, who's been pretty good all year. He had an incredible start to the season up until our winter break. But you know, he scored the first goal in that first game, and they had 2 others in the other game. But you know, Cangelosi always a tough opponent, and BU's going to find out this weekend.
And
yeah, seemingly the talent on BC, sorry to interrupt you, Dan, but seemingly the talent on BC, you know, during that really poor 2-month stretch just disappeared. And they're going to need guys like Cangelosi and White to start, you know, scoring goals and start leading this attack. And I think everyone was caught by surprise on the 14-goal outburst that BC had last weekend. But I think that wouldn't have caught anyone by surprise 2 months ago. I mean, this team has a ton of talent. It just seems like they haven't been able to put it all together. And I think, you know, if you're Coach Quinn and the BU team, you have to be shaking in your boots a little bit because it's really tough to beat a team 4 times in a season. And BC is coming off their best weekend of the year. And Jordan, you mentioned it. Lekis is pretty good in between the pipes, and he is a stranger to allow more than 4 or 5 goals in a game, let alone back-to-back nights.
And that'll do it for our weekly honors. But an even bigger honor is the Hobey Baker Award. And College Hockey released the top 10 finalists for the 2017 award. We're not going to analyze each candidate. I'll list them off, and then we'll go through and pick who we think will be the hat-trick finalists. But first, the list. Zach Aston Reese from Northeastern, forward. Forward Anders Bjork from Notre Dame. Forward Spencer Fu from Union. Forward Mike Vecchione from Union. Forward Tyler Kelleher from New Hampshire. Forward Alex Kerfoot from Harvard. Forward Tyler Sheehy from Minnesota. Defenseman Will Butcher from Denver. Goaltender Michael Bitzer from Bemidji State. And goaltender Charles Williams from Canisius. 10 of the best players who we have pretty much mentioned all of them during the course of this season on this podcast. But, you know, who do you guys think stands out, the 3 that stand out among this group?
I mean, I'm going to have to say the guy I picked to win this award halfway through the season, Zach Aston Reese. And then, you know, the ever-impressive Mike Vecchione. And then, you know, I was going to say Michael Bitzer, but this weekend he kind of proved me wrong. But, you know, I'm going to have to go with Spencer Fu and Mike Vecchione's counterpart there in Union. So, and I think those 3 guys have the best chance to make the Hobey hat trick. I know Fu and Vecchione are from the same team, but just what they've done this season together on a line has been, you know, just so impressive and unprecedented. I mean, these 2 guys just kind of came out of nowhere this year and took the NCAA by storm.
Are you sure I can't write Clayton Keller into at least the top 10? I think he's a guy who was such a playmaker despite the injury and not being in he ended up where in the top scoring? He wasn't necessarily in the top 10,
well,
but he was still high up.
He was 8th in the NCAA in points per game.
Well, that's still incredible, just a playmaker. So I'd at least write him into the top 10. But of the list that we've got here, I'm going to go with 2 of your 3, Jordan, Zach Aston Reese, and Mike Vecchione. And for my 3rd, I'm going to go with Anders Bjork from Notre Dame. Again, just such a playmaker and such a difference maker for a team like Notre Dame. I feel like he deserves to be in that top 3.
Yeah, he looks different. Go ahead, Chris.
Guys, a couple things I have on the Hobey Baker for this year. First, I think every single season, because the voting doesn't take place until after this weekend, we see teams that drop out early in the conference tournaments they're those guys that are nominated in the top 10 are at a huge disadvantage. And the 2 guys that jump off the page to me are Aston Reese and who's the other guy that we just mentioned that their team just got eliminated? Kelleher.
Kelleher,
New Hampshire.
yeah.
So my point there is that I think it's going to be really hard for those two guys to win because their seasons are over. And then you look at guys like Vecchione and Fu. To me, Vecchione is the favorite in a year where there is no favorite. I mean, this year is so bizarre in the sense that the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like there's one or two guys that everyone else is chasing. But I think this year, so much could happen in this last weekend that could sway the outcome. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, or any of you guys, there are no freshmen on this list, correct?
It does not appear so. No.
No.
The youngest
You're
is a
right.
sophomore, and that's
So-
Sheehy from Minnesota.
So that's one issue I continually have with the Hobie Baker, and I think that concern for me was put to rest the last few years with guys like Eichel and Kyle Connor. But I think that, to me, your year in school should not have any indication on whether or not you're nominated for the Hobie Baker. And I think the reason why it's like this, and not everyone will agree with me, is back in the day, freshmen and sophomore were never the best players on the team. But now in this day and age of college hockey, normally your most talented guys on big programs are freshmen and sophomore. And to me, it's just kind of, it's really, for lack of a better word, it's just stupid to have just juniors and seniors. And now I'm not taking anything away from these guys on this list, but I think that a guy like Keller should be on the list. And I know that's a little Boston bias, but I think you could say this for a number of different freshmen over the last few years that should be on the list that aren't. So that's, I'll end my hot take hiatus from Colorado. But I just think that the freshmen, your class should have no rendering on whether or not you're in the top 10 or should win it.
Yeah, and the only reason I think Kelleher was left out of the top 10 was because, or Keller rather, was left out of the top 10 was because he missed 8 games in the middle of the season to injury.
I mean, that I agree with you. But again, I totally get that. I just still don't think that alone should be taken out of him being in the top 10. Now, I don't think Keller should win the award, but I know you could play the what if game for a number of guys in college hockey, but if Keller was here for those 8 games and wasn't injured, he would probably be a heavy favorite to win the Hobie Baker.
Oh, without a doubt. And,
Yeah.
and another freshman that Jordan just pointed out to me was Dennis Smirnov from Penn State.
Great name.
So I think that freshmen, if Keller was a senior and missed 8 games for injury, he would 100% be in the top 10. It wouldn't even be a question.
And Chris, like I said, he's 8th in the league in scoring and points per game wise, and that's what you look at. I mean, what's a guy doing for you lately too? I mean, Keller had a beautiful little pass to JFK in the Hockey East in that Hockey East game against Northeastern. So I mean, Keller, he's been doing it all year, but like you said, maybe he's a freshman. He's not included in that list. Maybe he hasn't played enough games. But and to your other point about being, this league changing so much. I remember I was on the broadcast with you for one of those Notre Dame games, and I don't think we're ever going to hear a "He's our freshman" chant ever again because this league is just so young now, and there's so many freshmen that can play up to the level of seniors. And a freshman scores. Maybe 5-6 years ago, you'd hear that chant, and you'd love it. But now it's just kind of stupid. I mean, you look at BU. What do they have? 9 freshmen on their team?
10.
Yep.
If you count Nico Lynch.
Yep. So, and that's just the way it's going. But I agree with you. I think Keller could have slipped into this list, but there's just so much talent and big names on this list. And, of course, they had to at least account for a defenseman in Will Butcher and a few goalies in Bitzer and Williams.
And that said, Chris, who would your top 3 be?
One last thing I want to say before I give you guys my top 3. I think that also, you look at the NHL. I mean, the easiest equivalent between Hobie Baker is NHL MVP. And the reason why they're so entirely different is because everyone in the NHL pretty much plays the same schedule or close to it. You play all the teams in the league, whereas in college hockey it's completely different. I think you need the guy to me, Anders Bjork. He would be in my top 3, but he won't be in the committee's top 3 because he's the best player on one of the best teams in my opinion, the best conference or the second best conference in college hockey. So I think Anders Bjork is up there for me. I've got Vecchione as well. And then my third, I've kind of gone back and forth. I would probably say, I don't have the sheet in front of me, the Denver defenseman.
Will Butcher.
Yes, Butcher, because I just think, to me, Denver is so clear-cut the best team in college hockey. Now, do I think they're going to win it all? No. But what they do defensively, and it's all led by Butcher, I'd put him as my third guy. I take this award literally in the sense that I think it should be the best player in college hockey and not the guy that gets the most points, cough, cough, the ECAC, and just kind of steamrolls over some of the teams that aren't as impressive. I think the Hobey Baker Award should normally come from, one of the top 3 conferences in the league. That's
So if you're saying Hockey East, are you saying no Aston Reese or Kelleher because they didn't make their respected semifinal rounds?
Or the NCAAs?
You know what? Actually, I'll put Aston Reese in there with Butcher. So those are my 4. Aston Reese has to be in there. I wouldn't put Kelleher on that list, and that's simply because I just think it's hard to win the award when your team just sucks. I mean, UNH was bad this year, and Northeastern, they were better. So I'll correct that. Thank you for the. I'll put Aston Reese in there as kind of a 3A, if you will, because he deserves to be in that conversation. I kind of missed him when I was thinking about it.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm glad you said Will Butcher because defensemen, as we've talked about a couple times before on this show, defensemen don't get credit for it, and there should be a separate award for defensemen because they're not going to be seen as the top player in college hockey because they're not getting points. And in a day and age like this, points is all the rage. So you have players like Aston Reese, who, for me, will be in my top 3. You have players like Mike Vecchione, another huge point getter who's going to be in the top 3. But then you got a player like Will Butcher, who, and granted he's got a great goalie and great goalies and Tanner Jallett and Evan Cowley behind him, but still, a lot of Denver's success has been in the neutral zone and through defensemen making opponents work to gain all 3 zones. The transition game for Denver on defense is second to none, and it is the best in the country. They do have the best defensive core in the country, and it's a testament to the way Will Butcher has played this season. I think that Aston Reese and Vecchione have their point totals inflated because of the power play, mainly for both teams, but in terms of power play success, Northeastern was a lot better than Union was this year, so Vecchione has a bit of an edge in even strength points. But for a player like Will Butcher, he deserves to be in the top 3, in my opinion.
And he's been great. I mean, his entire college career, he's been Denver's good go-to guy, and he's feeding guys like Troy Terry and Dylan Gambrell and Henrik Bjorkstrom, and he's got 29 assists on the season, only 6 goals, but I mean 29 assists, that really jumps out to the page for you. I mean, guys in the top tier in point scoring don't even have that many. So I mean, for a defenseman as well, he's a good puck mover, he's a senior, and I think that does go into the conversation for Hobey Baker. I mean, he is a senior, he's their leader. And that's one of the main totems on the award category is leadership. And, they really take that seriously. And like you said, they don't just look at the points. They look at the all-around person. And, Will Butcher, I think, can be one of those top 3 candidates in the Hobey hat trick.
And voting for that will take place after the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. We'll have 3 candidates. And before you know it, the Frozen Four will be here, and we'll be deciding on who to pick for our Hobey Baker Award. But, Chris, we know your time is short with us, so we're going to jump around. Or you got to leave now, I guess.
No. I got a few more minutes.
Okay, so in that case, we will jump around, and we'll talk about Boston University. They just had a big series sweep over crosstown rival Northeastern, and they move into Hockey East Championship weekend to take on another crosstown rival, Boston College.
Yeah, this is really, I think, a fitting matchup in the sense that it's the 4th time they've played this year, and I hate to bring this up, but if BC were to beat BU this weekend, you could conceivably see BC in the tournament and then see them match up for the 5th time. And I might be putting too much stock into how BC played last weekend. I don't know if UVM was just wounded and was kind of done, but what BC did last weekend was huge. That being said, BU comes on a 3-game winning streak, and I thought Chad Chris's remarks really said a lot after that game on Saturday night against Northeastern. He just said, Northeastern is one dang good hockey team. They're one of the best teams we've played all season long, if not the best, and we came back twice from 2 goals down. And it worries me a little bit that they've been scored on first in 8 consecutive games, but to me it says more about this hockey team that they're able to still win games despite not scoring first. And I think if they can just get a first goal on Friday night against BC, I think that would do huge things for them moving forward. because I think this team is starting to get that it factor that's hard to get, and I think they're starting to get over that immaturity hump, and I think they're going to be a tough team to beat, and I think this weekend's important for them. If they go on to win Hockey tournament, I think they're going to have a massive chip on their shoulder, which would be a good thing for this team heading into the end of March.
And Chris, real quickly before you go, I just want you to know if you agree with this, but I think Northeastern's front six forwards, the top two lines, are probably the best in Hockey East and the best that I think BU's going to see until they get into the later rounds of the NCAA tournament.
I would completely agree with you, and I would say that despite all their talent, I think that BU matches up well against a team like Northeastern. I've said it a million times this year, BU struggles against physical teams. And when I think of physical teams that have been on BU's schedule this year, I think of the likes of Denver. They got swept. Notre Dame and Providence. Providence, they were lucky to get the 3 points. Denver, they played really well. I mean, Notre Dame, they played really well, but they earned a split. And then you look at teams like Boston College and Northeastern, who both skate really well. Look at BU's record against those two teams. They're 0-1. So I think that when BU plays teams that can skate really well, and that's their strength, no one's going to outskate BU. BU's got a lot of talent and a lot of speed, so I think you have to beat them by being more physical. And I think it's hard to beat a team 4 times in a row, but I still think that BU matches up well with BC. But a team like Lowell and a team like Notre Dame, those are going to be tougher matchups. But to answer your question, I do think that the top 6 forwards for Northeastern are probably the best 2 forward lines in the nation. To me, they're the best 2 in Hockey East. I think there are some close seconds. I think when BU's hot, their top 2 lines, when they have Bobo Carpenter healthy, are a close second. But the talent that they have with those top 6 guys is pretty much unparalleled in the nation, and that's why you're seeing Aston Reese, nominated for the Hobie Baker.
And one quick prediction for the weekend for you with all 3 games in Hockey East.
All 3 games in Hockey East. Okay, I'll start with the Notre Dame Lowell game. I think we're going to see a terrific game, and I think that we'll see somewhat of a low-scoring game. I'll say 3-1 with an empty netter in favor of the Riverhawks, and then BCBU. I'm going to predict we're going to have a late night on Friday night at the TD Garden. I think we'll see BU beat BC for the 4th time this season, 4-3 in a come-from-behind victory at the Garden, and then in the final. I think Lowell is going to be a tough out, but I told you guys a little over a month ago that I had BU winning Hockey East tournament, so why the heck not? I'll say that Ottinger stands on his head and BU beats UMass Lowell.
A bold prediction there from our own Chris P. Shea. Thank you very much for joining us, Chris. Get home safely, and we'll see you this weekend for Hockey East.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. We'll just backtrack it a little here. Back to our series against Northeastern this past weekend. Does falling behind like they did to a team like Northeastern, is that concerning to you at all?
No, I think that this team, as Coach Quinn has noted throughout the whole season, starts off with an immature game. They try and intimidate the other guys a little too much. I was listening to the commentators as well. Billy Jaffe was saying they play too big a game. They skate too fast. They stick handle too much. They hit too hard, and they get themselves out of position. But then something happens, and they recover really well to the point where they look like a completely different team, and that's why they've been able to come back and win. I agree that scoring a first goal would be so much better for them in the long run, but the fact that they've given up the goal in the last 8 games doesn't scare me too much anymore.
Yeah, and what I saw this weekend was their power play. Like, it was like a scene from ER where you take out the defibrillator and shock somebody to life, and that's what happened with the power play. It was, you had a team like Northeastern come in with the 2nd best power play in the country, 2 of the top scorers in power play goals in the nation, and they completely shut them out. And then their power play was lights out. You had goals from Fabro on the power play, Greenway in that overtime thriller, JFK on that beautiful tip on that pass from Keller, and then Chris, of course, on the game winner, which I thought shouldn't even have been a BU power play. I didn't think they should have called that penalty, but we can get into that in a little bit. But that's what I saw. I saw them getting revived by those power play opportunities when, in other cases throughout the entire season, that wasn't happening. And then that's where they showed up.
And BU a perfect 7 for 7 on the penalty kill this past weekend against the number 2 power play in the country, coming into the weekend at 28.9%. What they fall to, was I say 27.9?
27.
They fell a full percentage after going 0 for 7 this weekend. Fabro scoring on the power play. 5 of his 6 goals this season have come on the power play, so he's shown he can play very well on the man advantage, and he has that quarterbacking ability that's so valued clearly by his NHL team, Nashville. Hopefully he doesn't go there for another year or two, but and you like to see that power play quarterback in here in Boston. But just the way that they played in the first period, they're using the Rocky Balboa strategy, like he did against the Russian. I forget his name. In Rocky 4, he got beaten up in the first 5 rounds or so, and it's Ivan Drago.
There you go. There you go.
He got beaten up in the first 5 rounds and then came back and utterly dominated and ended up getting the victory over the Russian in Rocky 4. And that's what BU's been doing over the past couple games. They just get absolutely demolished in the first period. I mean, not in terms of shot attempts, because they're pretty even all weekend with Northeastern. Just in terms of the score, they were down 2-0 both nights. You going into the second period, and the first 5 to 8 minutes, I'd say, of the period is a bit sluggish, and then they start to get their feet under them, and you see them crawl back in with a goal, and then they feel real good about themselves late in the second, early in the third, and they get another goal. I think this team's a late period team. They're a late bloomer. That's been the case, pretty much the entire Quinn era, I'd say. So nothing different from what we've been used to, but you'd like to see this team jump out to a start. And against a team like BC, who is plus 21 in the first period, they're going to need to.
I mean, if it were something that was the antithesis of the Quinn era to not be a team that's good early, I would be a lot more freaked out about it. But because it's something that we've seen throughout Quinn's years here, that he has such a third period team, they're so strong late in games, that it's starting not to worry me as much. And I think that as much as you'd like to get out against BC, and if you can beat BC, you get out against whoever ends up advancing. If they do, people shouldn't be freaking out about it, because that Quinn's teams will play strong into the third.
Well, and the other thing people shouldn't be freaking out about is look who scored for Northeast. I mean, Zach Aston-Reese scored that first goal, an absolute snipe. I don't even know how he fit that, above Ottinger's pads. I mean, the guy's, 6'5"? Mm-hmm. He fills up so much of that net. And then Dylan Sakura with the second goal in that game. And then the next night, you get another snipe.
This is my favorite name in college hockey, Biagio Lorario.
What a name.
Velvety smooth.
I'm gonna pull out another name for you guys later. But yeah, Biagio Lorario. I wonder
goal.
if he's Italian.
That's right.
His first career goal.
But what a snip that was. And then Nolan Stevens, of course, on that beautiful deflection. So, I mean, these weren't bad goals. They were skilled plays by skilled players. And, Northeastern just somehow found themselves up 2-0, and it was up to BU to come back. And they did in both games, and they really wowed, everybody who was there. I mean, I know it was a depleted crowd with all the students gone for spring break, but Aganis was rocking after that Chris goal. That's what you like to see.
Yeah, definitely. And a Northeastern team also very good in the first period. They are also plus 21 in that first period, and then over the last 2 periods they were plus 6, including a -1 in the second. So a team very similar to Boston College, and I think we'll see a game very similar to Boston College. I like what Chris said with the come-from-behind win. And I'm glad he didn't say the O word, because I'm not really trying to be there all night long, which we saw last year with that triple overtime game between, I believe it was Providence and Lowell. Mm-hmm. But the Hockey East is always very competitive. And that being said, a matchup against Boston College for the 4th time, not sure who this one favors, because you have a BC team who is... They're basically saying, enough's enough. They're ready to beat BU, and BU, who might come in a little overconfident, saying, we beat this team 3 times, we can definitely beat them a 4th. And I think that's true. The better team's going to win this game. That kind of goes without saying, but the last time BU beat BC 4 times in a season happened once. 1994-95, they won a national title that year. By beating BC, BU can all but eliminate the Eagles from NCAA tournament contention, which would be the first time BC misses the tournament since 2009, another national championship year for BU.
Well, that's wow. That's
a lot of
good
history.
Stat digging there, Dan.
Oh man!
But what I look for in this series is just these guys skating the way they have, and the shakeup of lines that Coach David Quinn has used in the past 3 games. It's like the chemistry has just been off the charts. I mean, you get a guy like Nick Roberto who's kind of having a sluggish senior campaign. You stack him up on the second line, and look what he did on Saturday. He scored that nice goal and a nice feed, and they're going off now, and they're coming back to life.
And quickly something about Roberto. Seniors on BU team, there's only 3 of them. They have 17 combined points this year. Roberto has 13. And that goal that he scored on Saturday was his first in 19 games, first of the second semester. So it's good to see a senior like him. He does a lot of things that don't show up on the score sheet. He takes hits to make plays. I highlighted him in my preview for the week against Boston College, and I love the way he plays. He's a gritty player, and he deserves to be in the second line.
Yeah, he's skating hard, and he's fitting in with that line because, I mean, you look at who the line is. It's JFK, Greenway, and him, and that's just, it's JFK's the mastermind, and then Greenway and him are they're kind of grinders, but they also have unique offensive ability. Roberto has, he can skate fast, he can skate hard, and then Greenway is just that guy who wins every battle in the corner if he's not fighting after the whistle. But, with this team, what Chris said about their immaturity before, and what David Quinn said after the game, he said something like, "We're so immature that we're stupid," or something like that. And he kind of laughed off the question, but. And that's the thing with confidence. You can't be immature with the confidence, because if you're overconfident, you won 3 games against this Eagles squad, then you go in and you're overconfident at the Garden, that's the last thing you want to do. And immaturity really plays a big part with confidence. You have to be humble, and you have to know that this is your opportunity to take the Hockey East title and get to the final round.
I think that the one thing you also have to remember about this series is BU's going to remember the last time they were at the Garden and getting embarrassed by Harvard in the Beanpot final. You don't want to leave this season at TD Garden with a bitter taste in your mouth. I feel like regardless of how confident you can be against BC, maybe even overconfidence in that regard, you're going to remember that game, and you're going to apply so that way you don't get embarrassed like that again.
Yeah, and it's a chance really to redeem themselves. And in that game against Harvard, they took 5 penalties, which, if you ask Coach Quinn, only one of them was a valid call. It was an ECAC officiating crew, which we can have a lot of words about that off the air, and it's pretty well known that they are known to call the game a lot more stricter than a lot of other conference referees do. But staying disciplined is important. I think the team with the fewer penalties comes out of this game with the victory. I think in both games, really, because you have a team in UMass Lowell in the other matchup whose power play is just through the roof.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we want to go into predictions about the weekend. I feel like it's going to be.
I mean, yeah, I guess we could. In terms of the Notre Dame UMass Lowell matchup, before we get into predictions,
there you go.
I think that the travel obviously hasn't been a factor up to this point for Notre Dame. They had Providence go out there last weekend, and Compton Family Ice Arena is a tough place for opponents to play, and Notre Dame really makes it feel like home. And they're having teams come out from the East Coast every other weekend, but they're also coming to the East Coast every other weekend. So it kind of fits into their travel plans right now. After hosting a game, now they're coming back out to Boston. They've only been to the Garden once in their 4 years. This is now their 4th season in Hockey East. They've only been to the Garden once.
And final.
And it will be their final time. So do you guys feel that the travel might be a factor? I personally don't think so.
Not a chance. If they're coming that often to the East Coast to be playing all these teams in Hockey East, it's not going to be a factor.
I don't think the travel so much as who's behind them is a factor, because there's a lot of UMass Lowell fans that have been waiting for this day, and they're going to fill up the Garden. And I think it goes a huge way when you're at a neutral site and you get more people packed in there. College hockey is just such a game of ups and downs, and with both of these teams, they're just so exciting and fast playing. And you get a guy like Anders Bjork on the ice against a guy like CJ Smith, and it's going to be a battle. Obviously, both of these games are going to be battles, but I think, if we want to jump straight to predictions, I think UMass Lowell is going to come out with the cake, because, like you said, it's not so much about the travel, but I think it's just that UMass Lowell, familiarity with the Garden, their fans' familiarity with the Garden. I think they're going to go in there really confident and play their best game and take down Notre Dame.
And then for the BU-BC game?
I think they're going to go 4-0 against BC. I think BU is going to take this one as well. And like Chris said, I think it's going to be a really close game. I think his prediction is pretty valid. I think 4-3 is a good assessment. And maybe we'll see BC take that first goal in the first period again. and see the Terriers try to claw their way back in.
And then so now you have a BU UMass Lowell final. I mean, this is a matchup we've seen, and both games were extremely tight, extremely close, really good contests.
Yeah.
Who do you got coming out of that?
I mean, I'm going to have to copy Chris again and go with BU. It's just, I think that, their leadership going into this game, their goaltending, their coaching, everything going into this game, it's all coming up BU. And I think they're going to take, their best squad and this lineup that they've been rolling with. Hopefully Carpenter will come back and be available for that game against BC. And they'll really take it to the Riverhawks and take the Hockey East Championship, and they'll renew that banner with a nice little Boston University 2017 champs.
I'm going to start off with the BU-BC game, and I'm also not going to say the dreaded O word that shall not be named, because I don't think it's going to be a tight game. It's going to be a fun game. I agree that BU is going to go 4-0. I feel like this team is too well stocked. While BC did have a great weekend against Vermont, they've been a streaky team the last few weeks. They don't have a lot of firepower. They have guys like Colin White, guys on their back end, Ryan Fitzgerald, guys who in general can be great players, but they don't have cohesive firepower, and BU does. And that's going to be the edge. Regardless of who ends up scoring the first goal, I feel like BU has the edge regardless. So the Terriers will come out of that one. And then from the other matchup from Lowell and Notre Dame, I'm actually going with Notre Dame on this one. If you look at last weekend's series, Notre Dame played a great weekend of hockey against arguably one of the hottest teams in college hockey in Providence up until that point. And Lowell got a little scared from UNH, losing game 1, having a very tough game 2, and sure, they ended up blowing the Wildcats out of the water. I believe it was 6-1 after the first period in game 3.
They ended up scoring 8 goals.
Yeah, but, I mean, still, you don't want to have a scare to a team like that and have to recover. I feel like that gives you a little bit of anxiety and a lot of worry for your team, and I feel like a squad like Notre Dame can pounce on that. So I'm going with BU Notre Dame for the Hockey East Finals, and with that, BU has finally solved Cal Peterson. It showed in the second game at Agganis Arena. Again, these games are going to be a lot of fun and really close and really fun to watch, but in the end, it's going to be the Scarlet and White that's hanging from TD Garden once again.
I'll start with the Notre Dame Lowell game. I think Lowell's just a far superior team than Notre Dame, really in all aspects. Discipline-wise, on the power play, I think Lowell's real strong. I think that's probably one of their strongest assets. You have players like Joe Gambardella who are streaky fast forwards who can really shoot the puck and score. A young player like Kenny Hausinger who's come on late for this Lowell team and really makes his presence known in front of the net. They stack up bodies in front of the net, and you can see Cal Peterson gets a bit disheveled when he's got players in front of him, albeit still a very talented goaltender. He stays composed regardless, but most of the goals are when there's either an odd man rush for the opponent or there's players in front of Peterson, and that's when he struggles, and that's what UMass Lowell does best. So I think Lowell comes out with that game. And BU-BC, I don't want to say actually, back to Lowell, I don't want to say the dreaded O word, but you know what I'm going to say, free hockey. Mm-hmm. For the BU-BC game getting a much later start, I think BU's a very good team. Going against BC, it's going to be tough again, and I agree with Chris. I think it'll be a come-from-behind win for the Terriers, so we're setting up a BU-UMass Lowell final, and I'm going to have to say it, guys. I think Lowell's going to win the Hockey East Championship. Very close game, though. Maybe even just taking a little free hockey to decide it. And, either way, the team that wins that game coming out of it just will thoroughly deserve to win. Yep. It's really a toss-up for me, and it was a toss-up all 2 meetings between these two. It will be all 3 if they get to the final. It'll just be a toss-up. You don't know who's going to win, and really, if you're putting Vegas odds on it, just pick them. Honestly, there's no real line on the game. But I think Lowell has the advantage in terms of physicality, and that's where BU kind of struggles. They don't like to get hit around too much.
And saying that as well, that's not to the detriment of the team that loses either in your scenario. Both teams are incredible teams to watch and have bright futures ahead of them in the NCAA tournament, regardless of whether they win the tournament or not.
It's not a winner. Win or die scenario.
I mean, for BC it is.
Yeah, for BC clearly it is, but for a team like BU, if they happen to lose against Notre Dame or Lowell, it's not to their detriment and will only prove to be a chip on their shoulder for the NCAA.
And for BU, it's a huge game because if you don't win that game, your number 1 seed hopes are dashed. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know what? I mean, UMass Lowell could come away with it. BU could come away with. Lowell's been there for the last 5 years in the final, or it would be the fifth time in the final.
Norm Bazin, what a coach.
Norm Bazin, an amazing coach. You got Coach Quinn on the other side, and a team that might not have as much experience as Lowell, but still certainly is talented. You chalk it up as a toss-up for me because either one of these teams could come away, but if I had to pick one, I might have to go with Lowell just based on the fact that they've been there the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I mean, so the way Dan and I are setting it up, and Chris as well, with UML being in that second game, BU's gonna have to go through 2 brick walls: Joe Wall
and Tyler Wall.
and Tyler Wall.
And when Lowell and BC met on the final weekend of the year, there were 2 walls on either side of the ice.
That's right.
How about that?
Too many walls.
Too many walls.
If these
to talk
walls
about.
could talk.
How about more conferences though? Don't want to go into the other conference tournaments too much, but there's 5 other conferences in college hockey going for their tournament titles this weekend. We'll just go through who we think is going to win each conference very quickly, and we'll start with the Big Ten because we really haven't talked about them. This is their only weekend of playoff hockey in conference tournament play, and it's all 6 teams in action. You have the play-in games on Thursday, the semifinals Friday, and the championship game on Saturday. Guys, out of the Big Ten, it's a stacked conference up top, but who do you think's going to have the edge?
I'm thinking Penn State. I want their Cinderella season to keep rolling, and they got kind of an easy setup versus Michigan. Michigan is very depleted this year and hasn't looked good as of late. So I think Penn State can come out, but I mean if they're going to have to go through Michigan State or Ohio State, and that's a tough test. But I want Penn State there.
Give me Wisconsin in this one. Luke Cunnin and Trent Frederick are forces to be reckoned with in the Big Ten offense. They're going to go up against a really good team regardless. I like Penn State or a Minnesota for that matchup, but I think that Wisconsin just has such firepower to overcome in Cunnin and Frederick.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a Minnesota-Wisconsin final. I'm pretty sure that's possible. But, a Minnesota-Wisconsin final, it's going to be a terrific Big Ten tournament, really will be. And, the top 2 teams having that first night off, playing 3 straight nights is wearing on a team. Really shows that the team with the most grit and skill will win that third game. And, both teams having that bye on the first night gives them a bit of an edge. So, I like Wisconsin-Minnesota final, but I think Wisconsin has the edge in that matchup. Especially, like you said, Jake, with Cunnin and Frederick. But the one thing that does concern me is that Wisconsin's goaltender, Matt Jurasik, is injured. So not sure on the status of him. No real updates have been posted all week. So we'll keep an eye on that situation for Wisconsin. Not a good time for their starting goaltender to be hurt. But I still think the Badgers, they need a win. They need to win the tournament to get in, basically. And, I don't think that's going to deter them at all. The next conference I want to talk about is the NCHC, the only conference with still a consolation game in their tournament as we really start out west here with our breaking down the conference playoffs. But in the NCHC, who do you guys like?
There's no question in my mind that Denver is going to win this. You have a good team like Duluth mixed in there too, and that's probably what the final is going to end up being. But Denver, far and away, as Chris mentioned, is the best team in college hockey holistically. Denver is going to run away with this.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say Denver as well.
I like Denver also. I mean, I think it's a unanimous pick for a reason. And you take a look at the way Tanner Jallett's played in that. We talked about Will Butcher already on the show, and I was a Hobie Baker finalist. And, up front, you got a player like Henrik Borgstrom who can really just impact a game on all spectrums. You got Troy Terry, who we saw what he could do in the World Junior Championships. And, I mean, although there aren't really shootouts at this juncture of the season, it's still just the skill he has and, the alertness and awareness he has to get the puck on net. That carries over from his experience in the World Juniors, and it really helps this Denver team, and it gives them an edge in this packed NCHC Final Four.
And don't forget a guy like Dylan Gambrell as well, who used to be a part of the Pacific Rim line with Danton Heinen and Trevor Moore, both who have moved on to their respective NHL organizations. But Gambrell, a lot of leadership coming from a top line that used to produce a lot in college hockey.
Yeah, and you thought that the loss of those two might hurt this Denver team, but really it just made them stronger. They're so much better now, and especially with a player like Borgstrom coming in, really taking the place of Heinen. You've seen just what he can do, and I think the world's about to see what Denver can do, especially come NCAA tournament time. But the final conference out west is the WCHA. The only bid from that conference comes from the winner of that game on Saturday. It's the Broadmoor Championship Trophy competition between Michigan Tech and Bowling Green. Who do you like?
I wish I could go with the Cinderella story and go with Bowling Green, but I just can't. I'm going to go with the Michigan Tech Huskies. They've got such balance. And by balance, I mean I can count 8 or 9 of their guys who have 20 or more points this season. They look great up and down the lineup. Joel Esperance, Matt Roy, Reed Sturos, Shane Hanna, Mark Ock. They just have great balance up and down the lineup from defensemen and from forwards. And then Angus Redmond is he's a good goaltender, 21-9-5 with a .919 save percentage. He's really good. So I have to go with Tech over Bowling Green here.
I'm going to have to go with that Cinderella story and go with Bowling Green because Chris Nell, he's been our back-to-back defensive player of the week. He's had some incredible playoff hockey games, and they're led by guys like Mitch McLean and Kevin Dufour, who had a hat trick in one of those playoff games over the weekend. So, I mean, I'm going to have to go with Bowling Green just because they're rolling right now, and, you never know what could happen in these games.
Yeah, and Bowling Green's a real balanced offense. I like the way Chris Nell's been playing down the stretch, .916 save percentage, 2.15 goals against average. Taking a look at the regular season series these guys played, it was back in early December at Bowling Green, Ohio. They only met twice in that series, and it was 3-1 win and 2-1 win for Michigan Tech in both of those games. Bowling Green got out front in both games. So if Bowling Green gets a lead, especially the way Chris Nell's been playing coming down the stretch, he's not going to give up that lead. And I think you're going to see the Falcons in the NCAA tournament once again, and a team that many had written off at the start of the season. But moving on now, Atlantic hockey, another one that could only see one bid, but depending on how the dominoes fall, you could see 2 Atlantic teams in the tournament for the first time since 2013. Really, guys, I think it's between Air Force and Canisius, but who do you guys think?
Give me Canisius here. Charles Williams has been a playmaker as a goaltender for the Eagles, and I feel like that's going to be the difference in this one. Having great goaltending, it starts in your net and goes from there, and to have a guy like Williams as a Hobie Baker potential top 10 guy, I think that it works very well in their favor.
Yeah, I'm liking Canisius too, but I mean, you look at another Falcons team in Air Force, and they got guys like Jordan Himley, who's got 31 points on the season, and they got their guy Shane Starrett in that. But I just think Charles Williams is going to be way too much for Air Force, and they're not going to be able to get past the brick wall that he's built in Canisius so far. And
Canisius against the 3 other Atlantic teams in this tournament is 3-0-3 this season. Wins against all 3, ties against all 3. They've only played them in 1 series apiece. But, I like the way Charles Williams played. He has the best save percentage in the country, and that's not for no reason. He's got a good team in front of him as well. But the way that, you've seen Canisius coming down the stretch as well, it's all about how you're playing now at the end of the season, not about how you played in the early goings of the season. And that's where Air Force really found their strong suit. Was they came out of the gate strong, they came out fast, and they looked real good. But then Canisius down the stretch has been pretty much unstoppable. They haven't lost since January 7th. And in that time, they've only tied 3 games. I mean, they were 7-10 after that loss. They're now 21-10-7. It's an incredible run for them. I mean, how can you not like Canisius in this matchup? The ECAC, though, another conference in the East here. And our final one that we have to break down that's
tough.
Extremely competitive, especially with those top 2 teams.
It is going to come down to those top 2 teams, without a doubt, Harvard and Union. And it's a coin toss, but if I really had to go with one, I'm going to go with Harvard. I think I picked them for the regular season too, but because of their depth, because of how well Merrick Madsen plays, they've got such a strong lineup there. It's really hard to find a weakness in all 18 guys. So I'm going to go with Harvard, but honestly, if Union won, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with you too and say I think Union's going to take this one because, you look at their guys, Spencer Fu, Mark Vecchione, Sebastian Vidmar, Sapinski. You can go down the entire line, and then their goalie, Alex
Sakharopoulos.
I knew I was going to do that.
There you go.
And we just call him Sack on the broadcast. I remember when me and Piché did the Union game, we were just calling him Sack because that's his nickname. That's what everybody calls him in the locker room. It's kind of a funny nickname, but he's 22-4-2 this year. He's one of the least talked about goalies in the NCAA, and I think, once they get their top line guys going, I mean, you look at what Mike Vecchione's doing. He's almost scored 2 points a game. So, and in playoff hockey, his senior leadership is just going to be amplified that much more.
And the one team I think Union has struggled with a lot this season is Cornell.
Yep.
They lost and tied to Cornell in their regular season series, a home and home, and I like the Big Red in this semifinal matchup. I think Cornell's going to shock Union and earn a berth in the final, but then their consolation right there is they have to meet Harvard. So Harvard's going to win this one flat out. They're just the superior team. They might even win the national championship game later in April, but Harvard and the ECAC is my prediction for that conference. We're going to jump back now. We jumped ahead to the BU section of the podcast. We'll jump back now, and we'll talk about the weekend roundup. My first big point here is we had a lot of surprises eliminated early. St. Cloud State, a tournament team last year, and a number 1 seed, number 2 overall seed, was eliminated. Bemidji State, who many picked to win the WCHA tournament title as well as after winning the regular season title, they're eliminated as well. RIT, the reigning Atlantic hockey champion, eliminated. Reigning Hockey East champion, Northeastern, is out. And the big thing about these teams being eliminated already is their non-conference record. And it really stresses the importance of having a strong non-conference schedule, and you're seeing it right now in the way that Boston College is desperate for a win in this Hockey East tournament because of their weak non-conference schedule.
Absolutely. It's something we talked about with BC early in the season, that it felt like such a cupcake schedule. And then finally, as of late, when you get to conference play, it's been middling. So you're right. It's a do-or-die win for them. But I think another thing as far as the whole weekend is concerned is you look at the parity in college hockey, and that you're not really going to see a repeat champion every year because teams change so much. You get great players going different ways. Recruiting always helps a team. You're never going to see a champion repeat more often than not. So it's really great to see a lot of these guys get eliminated, frankly, because you get to see teams who either haven't succeeded or just, frankly, different teams in general rise up and have the chance to win a championship.
And that's what I love about these Cinderella stories like Bowling Green. They knocked out Bemidji State. Everybody picked them to win, and look at where they are now. They can almost take that in a one-game final. So and like you said, it's the parity, and you love to see teams that were kind of unsung get up there like Bowling Green has done, and it's just there's so many teams, so many great players in this league, and it's great to finally get to this weekend and find out what's going to happen, because there's just so much uncertainty with every single game that we see, every matchup that we see. And
a team like Canisius really tested themselves this year. They opened up the season at North Dakota, lost both games by a combined score of 10-1, then hit the road out to Alaska, played Alaska Fairbanks in their home rink, and then Alaska Anchorage in the Fairbanks Arena, beat Fairbanks at home, and then lost in the neutral site game to Anchorage the following night. And then another test is they traveled to Penn State. So 6 big non-league games for Canisius, and it shows that if you test yourself, you're going to be in a good position at the end of the year, because they've traveled to Alaska, they've played at Engelstad Arena, they played at Penn State, who was playing their best hockey coming out of the gate, and look at the way that they perform now. They've won 14 games, tied 3 in their last 17. It just shows that having an important non-conference schedule is key for teams, especially coming down the stretch, because you've tested yourself in that way. And another prime example right here at BU. You played Denver. You played at Michigan. I know Michigan had an off season, but it's always tough to play there.
Still, it was early in the season when we played Michigan, and Michigan was looking good at that point, and we had a tough weekend.
Their freshman goaltender, I believe it was Hayden Levine, had like a .955 save percentage through the end of October.
So that's why it's really important to challenge yourselves and not play a team like Colorado College, and wink, wink, nod, nod to another team in Hockey East.
Well, and you think about it, we beat Harvard. I don't want to say we, but you beat Harvard, and they also beat Union.
They did. A depleted
with
team.
a B team, with a skeleton crew.
Literally skeleton crew. So, I mean, and you take that into account, and I think,
that's what makes
said enough
BU's chances
about
great.
BU today, but that's what makes their chances great.
Our next talking point here is coaching casualties. I don't really want to go into it too much, but just want to mention the big 3 here. Northern Michigan's coach Walt Kyle out after 15 seasons. There's actually some some
has a-
criminal drama going
He
on.
has a warrant
there.
out for his arrest.
And he was later arrested on charges of fraud and forgery, but according to his lawyer, he's innocent. That's just something we'll be following throughout the end of the season. We'll see how that case develops. But Walt Kyle, just the second coach in Northern Michigan history, he is out after 15 years. So now they're looking for the third in such a storied program. So going to be tough to find a successor there. Another program, Niagara, who will be without Coach David Burkholder for the first time in 11 years, as they've mutually agreed to part ways. Niagara, after just an abysmal season, going 3-27 and taking over 20 minutes in penalties per game. And finally, the big shock, I think, of the coaching casualties here is Dean Blaze of Nebraska Omaha has decided to step down.
Omaha has a good program, too. Formerly of Coach Quinn, Coach Blaze made the tournament 2 years ago when it was here in Boston. That's
Four 2 years
right.
ago. And it's a program that's been on a bit of a downward slide over the past couple of seasons, but that's expected with the loss of a goaltender like they had 2 years ago in Ryan Massa. I think the decision might be recruiting based, but you never know.
Well,
But nonetheless, Dean Blaze is out at Omaha, and that's a prime program in the nation. To see who's going to be his successor is going to be the story of the summer.
and they're right on the bubble. I mean, there's no way they're going to make the tournament. But I mean, 17-17-5 on the season, but they're still at 19 in the pairwise. So I mean, that's kind of, that's a big shock to see Blaze go out like that, and with a team like that and how they were just a few years ago.
And another big thing here is player flight risks. Players who are not seniors but decide to leave early. We've seen a lot of players turning pro, some seniors, some underclassmen. One in particular in Hockey East, kind of close to home, is Tage Thompson, who has decided to join the St. Louis Blues from the Yukon Huskies. And most recently here at BU, a report today from Kirk Leduc saying that JFK, Jacob Forsback Carlson, will turn pro at the end of the year. Some other reports I've heard that say Greenway is not far behind as well. And then with the Hockey East semis in Boston, you have four big Bruins prospects in JFK, Charlie McAvoy, Ryan Fitzgerald for Boston College, and then Anders Bjork. Fitzgerald is senior, so he'll definitely be out. But interesting to see if McAvoy and Bjork will join JFK in the Bruins organization. What do you guys think?
Well, I feel like it's tough for a lot of these guys to speculate now because they're in the middle of their tournament. It is the appropriate time of season to start talking about this because of these college free agent signings. I think it's interesting that JFK is leaving. I don't know where the room for him is right now. It might be in the AHL for another year or two, but because the Bruins have such center depth, I feel like it's going to be tough for him to break up there right now. But I feel like the rest have very established places and can follow suit very easily. Charlie easily could be an NHL defenseman right now. Jordan easily could be on the wing in Minnesota right now. Bjork easily could be on the wing for the Bees right now. They all have established places. And from what I read in Leduc's article, the source says they're basically consummate pros playing in college hockey, and that's the way it feels. They're just such good players. As much as JFK could use another year if he really chose to continue developing his game, I feel like it would also benefit him from playing against men versus playing against boys. I mean, sure, you get the 23 and 24-year-olds in college hockey, but to really play against men and play in the step right below the NHL and get yourself prepared, I feel like it'd be a good move.
Yeah, JFK, he just, you're talking about the center depth, and he really reminds me of David Krejci. He's just got that sense to him. He's got that killer instinct, and, it's kind of sad that we're not going to see him in Boston for, another maybe 2-3 years at the NHL level. But like you said, I think Charlie really has a chance to crack that lineup in the next year or even 2 years just to play it safe. But, the Bruins just, we go on and on about how stacked their prospect lineup is, and and it's just a testament to Hockey East that four of those guys that we highlighted are playing in these semifinal games.
Yeah, and defense definitely a big need for the Bruins, and Charlie McAvoy fills that need. Although I don't think he's quite ready.
No,
he's still guilty of trying to do a little too much, which is
but I mean he has so many things that just go off the radar. I mean, he had 3 assists on all 3 of the Terriers' goals, given their secondary assists. But I mean,
still a point, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
And that went under the radar. Nobody's really highlighting. JFK got the that player of the week nod along with Austin Cangelosi. But Charlie McAvoy had 3 assists in their biggest game of the season. in that game too against Northeastern, and he plays so many minutes for this Terrier team, and he's such an integral part of this lineup that I think he might be ready at the end of the season. I don't think they're going to really slate him in, but if they had more room, if he was maybe going to a team like the Colorado Avalanche or a team that's down there in the standings, maybe he'd have a chance to crack the lineup, but not this Bruins team yet.
Jordan, you called JFK a David Krejci-like player. I happen to think he's actually the Patrice Bergeron heir apparent as a really incredible two-way player.
Yeah.
Just can learn a lot from someone who, in all honesty, is going to win the Selke again.
I completely agree with you. He's like the spitting image of Patrice Bergeron, only Swedish. He wins faceoffs like almost at a rate like Bergeron. He is a two-way player. He's a very good defensive forward at that too. And when he's on the ice, it's tough for teams to score. I mean, you take a look at his stat line this season. The points might not be all there, but he did have a good stretch of games in the middle of the year where I think he had 7 goals in 4 games.
That's right. Including a hat trick.
Ended the season with 13 goals, 18 points for 31 points, which is still pretty good.
It's good for third on the team, second on the team behind Keller.
Yeah, and only a +8 as well. So, I mean, he's definitely not on the ice for too many opponent goals.
This is why I think that the Bruins are going to end up not re-signing Dominic Moore or Riley Nash, and maybe that's the chance they give JFK to start on the fourth line and just be able to learn from Patrice and move up from there.
I mean, you could have a college hockey fourth line on the Boston Bruins next year.
Bjork, JFK.
You could have Bjork, JFK, and maybe Ryan Donato.
Donato, maybe,
or
maybe
Fitzgerald.
maybe what you do actually is. Free agent signings and Vetrano ends up on the fourth line. So you go JFK, Bjork, Vetrano, and that's incredible.
That's your Hockey East lineup.
It truly is. And JFK has only been on the ice for 19 opponent goals this season. And that's just an incredible number. It's so low. I mean, considering you take a look at some of the other, the fourth line, obviously, those stats deflated, but some of the other players, like Charlie McAvoy's been on the ice for 26 goals. Jordan Greenway's been on the ice for 25 opponent goals, but 19, one of the lower numbers here on this list, are actually kind of right in the middle, but not too bad either.
No, not at all.
So, whether those 4, well, definitely 1 and Ryan Fitzgerald will be leaving,
gone.
Maybe on the Bruins, you never know. But whether those other 3 are in black and gold anytime soon, still up for debate because, and we'll see how the rest of college hockey is impacted by early leaving underclassmen as the offseason continues to expand.
Regardless, I think Coach Quinn has prepared for this. If you look at his recruiting class for next year, I think it's clear that he's at least prepared for this in some regard with the Kachuk son who's coming here, with David Ferentz on the blue line. I think that Coach Quinn has, even if they don't leave, it's going to be great, but I think Coach Quinn is at least somewhat prepared for the fact that if they leave, you're going to need to fill these holes.
And our final talking point today is if the tournament ended today. I made another bracket this week because I'm addicted to that. And I'm gonna make a little tweak to this. No teams moving, but just seeds changing. So BU is gonna be in the Northeast Regional as the 2 seed, with Minnesota as the 1 seed. Minnesota will take on Cornell, which will move down to the 13 seed, and then Penn State, which will move up to the 12 seed. Will take on BU, the 2 seed in that bracket. So
oh boy,
I kind of messed that one up when I was doing the seeding myself. And Minnesota was supposed to be 4 and Cornell 13. I don't know why I had a 5-12, but I messed up the seeding there. My bad. I tweeted that out earlier this week. But that's the BU regional, the Northeast regional. The East regional in Providence will be Harvard against Ohio State in the first round. 2 power plays that are just off the charts. And then Western Michigan against Providence in a really intriguing matchup for me personally. And then in the Midwest Regional in Cincinnati, it will be Minnesota Duluth taking on whoever the Atlantic champion is, and Union taking on Notre Dame. And then finally the West Regional in Fargo, Denver taking on the WCHA champion. And then, pending the results of the Hockey East tournament, I have UMass Lowell taking on North Dakota in Fargo.
Man.
Tell me what you guys think.
Those are all juicy matchups.
That's hard to pick
I think
one.
the best matchup coming out of the gate is Union versus Notre Dame. I think they just play so similarly, and I think, as a first-round game, that's going to be one of your best ones to watch.
I don't know. Give me Harvard and Ohio State. As you said, Dan, those power plays are absolutely lethal. That's going to be fun to watch. You just hope that one team stays disciplined, or you could just see a power play frenzy.
I don't think there is a game in this that wouldn't be fun to watch. I mean, you're talking about Minnesota Duluth potentially against Air Force or Canisius, a really good defensive team in either one of them. So, I mean, we'll see how Minnesota Duluth in their age-old offense can figure out that. And then you have Denver against whoever the WCHA champion would be, and I think that's the only real blowout matchup. But again, we've seen a number one team fall before in the tournament not too long ago when Minnesota State was the number one overall and fell to RIT. So we'll see if the WCHA champion, whether it's Bowling Green or Michigan Tech, has what it takes to knock off Denver. But I don't think anything's going to knock off Denver until the Frozen Four.
Not for a while.
But my intriguing matchup, I like Minnesota and Cornell. To me, that's a really good matchup. I like Cornell's goaltender, Mitch Gillum. He's been the guy for the last 3 years now. He's really just a stay-at-home goaltender. He doesn't allow too many goals. And the Cornell defense is pretty stellar, and that goes against the Minnesota offense that has been lights out this season, as well as a defense led by goaltender Eric Shearhorn. So a lot of intriguing matchups there, and the NCAA selection show will be on Sunday. We will be covering that in some form or way. Not sure whether we'll be live at the Boston University watch party or whether we'll be maybe even right here breaking down the matchups as they are revealed live to us at noon on Sunday. But, games of the week in the NCAA, I don't even really have to say them. It's the championship games on Saturday. Just watch all 6 if you can. Some way to split the screens and then use your phone or iPads or other devices for the NCAA basketball tournament when there's 4 games going on. So you could have 10 college games going on. It's like, to me, that's just fantasy land.
Is this Christmas in March?
Honestly, it is.
March Madness.
I know tomorrow I'm just going to be locked into NCAA basketball.
Oh, yeah.
4 games at once. I'll have my phone, my iPad, my computer. I'll do it in class, at home. I don't even care. Digressing from that, who do you have winning the NCAA basketball tournament? Why we don't get a chance to talk too much hardwood on this podcast?
I went with Kentucky on this one.
Ooh. I had them out in the second round of Wichita
I had them
State.
out in the second too.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that they've just got the right numbers if you look at the advanced stats.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't jump. I will never jump on the Duke bandwagon.
Never.
No.
Never in a million years
None
will
of
I do
that on this
that.
podcast.
Duke's going to be knocked out by Southern Methodist. You heard it here first. Folks.
But, I like Kentucky. I feel like just overall, they're not a bad seed. They're number 2 seed, so it's not like it's out of the blue.
No, not at all.
My big upset, though, is URI over Creighton.
That's your biggest upset?
I got URI over.
It's one of my bigger ones.
I got Middle Tennessee going 2 rounds.
No, I've got Middle Tennessee also. I like that.
I have Florida Gulf Coast beating Florida State, a 14 over a 3.
As do
Nice. But who you guys got winning? I know, Dan, you told me yesterday you got an interesting team there.
I do.
I got UNC. Just the reason I got UNC is I've been following them all season, and my buddy's a diehard UNC fan, and they just, I feel like once they get going, the Tar Heels hit the floor and they'll be able to run it. But I have them going up against Duke in the final.
Do the Tar Heels have an Achilles heel?
Yeah, and their Achilles heel is my pick to win the national championship, also coming out of that regional. It's a good offense in UCLA.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah, I like the way Lonzo Ball controls that offense and runs the play. They've scored over 100 points, I think 10 times this season, or over 10 times this season. It's incredible the way that offense works. It's like old-style college basketball, and it's great, and you love to see the way UCLA plays.
But wouldn't it, I know he's just a kid, but wouldn't it be great to see Lonzo out in the first few rounds and then just shut up his dad? That's all anyone's talking about right now. It's just painful.
Before we close out our hockey podcast, your big upsets in NCAA basketball tournament. I told you mine, Florida Gulf Coast, but I got Bucknell over West Virginia as my biggest upset.
I do too, actually.
All right.
Upset City, baby.
What about you, Jordan?
My biggest upset, I have Michigan going pretty far. I think I have Michigan going into the Elite 8.
I have them dropping to Louisville in the second round.
Yeah. You're gonna be surprised. I have Michigan in my Final Four.
I almost did, but then you can't be too bold.
Not good at hockey this season, but
No.
the basketball team creating quite the story down the stretch for Michigan.
Yeah, with the plane crash, they had the plane practice jerseys. Who wouldn't love to see them go far?
It truly is March Madness, and hockey's not too far behind. It's not too far behind, or not too far along until we'll be doing bracketology here on our hockey podcast for the NCAA Division I tournament. We'll also be at the regionals, and that's only like 10 days away.
No.
So it's like a dream, but it's actually happening. This is great. I love this time of year, and it's the perfect way to get through March, which is my least favorite month of the season. So, but that's going to do it here for episode 20 of This Week in College Hockey. A big thanks to Chris Pichet for joining us from Vail, Colorado. He got snowed in. That's why he was out there and not in studio. He skipped class, but, the excuse was valid, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
A big thanks to you guys as well, Jordan Tebow and Jake Reiser, for joining me this week. And then I'm Dan Schulman, signing off for episode 20 of This Week in College Hockey.